North Carolina is blessed with water. Rivers and streams carry the liquid of life to every corner of our state.
Ponds and lakes by the thousands dot our landscape. In the Piedmont, multi-cove lakes spread like spiders.
They include Carr Reservoir, Lake Norman, and High Rock. In the mountains where clear streams once cascaded over valley floors, dams now back up water that is often 100 feet deep. Lake James, Fontana, and Santilla are sources of water, power, and recreation. Their dams are engineering marvels.
Today, however, we are not going to explore these man-made marvels, but two very old lakes and a pond in the lowlands of eastern North Carolina.
On the coastal plain, where land is very flat, lakes look different from space. Here, there are no more twisted spiders, but round ovals made by the hand of nature. In southeastern North Carolina, you will see the mysterious Carolina Bays. Look closely and you will see ovals of vegetation where ancient lakes once dotted the landscape. Where did these so-called Carolina Bays get their name? I ask Chris Helms, Superintendent of Lake Waccamaw State Park.
The name Carolina Bay is actually a misnomer in a couple different ways. Carolina, for one thing, they occur in more areas than just the Carolinas. They occur actually from Maryland to Florida in the coastal plain parts of those sections. And then the name bay is not to signify the water necessarily as a body of water, but also the vegetation that grows here. There's three different types of bay trees: red bay, loblolly bay, and sweet bay. And each one of those are similar enough, but they also belong to different families, but they're found in the surrounding bay forest.
These bay leaves are the main spice in Old Bay shrimp seasoning. But I still wanted to know more about the origin of the mysterious ovals.
Carolina Bays were actually first seen when folks got up in the aircraft in the late 30s and early 40s and started taking aerial photography. They saw a characteristic northwest to southeast pattern of these ovals, and they wondered what caused them. Well, the meteorite theory was probably one of the first ones that came to be, is that meteorites coming from outer space would have scarred the Earth and caused these, but there's a little bit of problem with that. They're very shallow lakes, only sometimes up to about 11 feet deep. We've never found any meteorite evidence, so some folks don't really necessarily agree with that theory these days. One is prehistoric fish type theory, where actually called the whale wallow theory, and that said that giant prehistoric fish would have hollowed out during spawning these type of fish beds that then in turn turned into Carolina Bays. Well, the problem with that too is that up to a 9,000 acre Carolina Bay, it would be a very big fish to do that. Well, the one that has the most credence these days is called the oriented lake theory, or the wind and wave action theory, that said consistent winds from the northeast would have hollowed these areas out, causing wind patterns and eddying in the lake that eventually would have led to an oval shape.
Even though 20th century man was the first to see these waters from high above, they have been used by American Indians for thousands of years.
The local Native Americans use the lakes for transportation, for fishing. We've actually even found small canoes in the lake, and some even up to as long as 20 feet. The local tribe would have been the Waccamaw Siouan tribe that inhabited the area and utilized the lake, and they still have a presence here actually nearby. The Waccamaw Siouans had the legend that the lake was the land of the falling star, which would tie it real closely to the meteorite theory of more recent times.
Most of the Carolina Bay lakes are oval, and most are filled with acidic, peaty soil. But Lake Waccamaw is different.
Lake Waccamaw is a Carolina Bay, like of course many of the others in the area, but it also has very much of a distinction in the water quality that's here, or the water chemistry as well. The water chemistry of this lake is much more buffered than some of the other Carolina Bay lakes in our area. Jones Lake, Salters Lake, Singletary Lake over in Blaine County have a lot of acidity, and so there are only certain species that can live there, certain fish species. Here at Lake Waccamaw, we are buffered by a limestone outcrop that is on the north side of the lake, but also underlies the lake. And so it helps to neutralize the acidity that's here and makes it a lot more diverse as far as what fish population and mollusk population can live here. One of the keys to the diversity here at Lake Waccamaw, in addition to the limestone outcrop that neutralizes the lake, is the sheer number of aquatic invertebrates that are here as a food source for the mussels and fish. In more acid lakes, a lot of these small microscopic organisms can't really live, but in a near neutral condition like Lake Waccamaw is, it does allow for a lot of these species to thrive.
Chris took me on a wading tour where he showed me many species of freshwater shellfish, some found nowhere else in the world. Insects, such as this Halloween pennant dragonfly, were everywhere. Every inch of the shoreline was alive. Later that day, I took my kids on a boat tour of this 9,000-acre gem, where we looked for mollusk, alligators, and eagles. Life on the shore was just as diverse as that in the water.
The animal diversity and endemic species at Lake Waccamaw get a lot of attention, but we also are home to a lot of plant communities that are found in not a lot of other places in North Carolina. We've got the natural lake shoreline along the undeveloped part of the park that is found here with specific aquatic-based plants that are here, lily pads, grasses that are here, and not many other places in North Carolina. You go through our bay forest, which is home to the bay trees that we've mentioned before. And then you get into carnivorous plants that are found often in the savannas or in the edges of some of these habitats. Carnivorous plants include our Venus flytrap, pitcher plants, sundews, and bladderworts too. On the drier sections on the sand rim, which is usually on the southeastern side of the lake, you start to get into your typical longleaf pine, wiregrass type plant community. And a lot of these communities are also fire dependent. Carnivorous plants come back well after fire. We also see orchid species that respond after fire.
Although the shoreline looks wild, many houses and piers ring Lake Waccamaw. But Chris says landowners know how to coexist with nature.
Lake Waccamaw is a special place, as we've already talked about, with the diversity and the animals and plants that are here, but also we have human interactions here too. So it's a balancing act between the enjoyment by humans, the development by humans in this sensitive and fragile area.
Farther up our coastline is another Carolina Bay type lake called Lake Phelps. Fortunately, North Carolina has a major park at Lake Phelps called Pettigrew State Park. We visited with Sid Sharon, park superintendent, who told us how Lake Phelps got its name.
Well, Pettigrew State Park contains Lake Phelps, which is a big natural lake. It was named for a guy named Josiah Phelps. Legends have it that two people were hunting and they got lost. One climbed a tree and said, "Hey, there's a big lake out there." And Josiah Phelps heard that, ran toward the lake, jumped in it, and claimed it to be Lake Phelps. Lake Phelps is the second largest natural lake in North Carolina. It has been debated a lot about if it's a Carolina Bay or not. It really looks like two Carolina Bays, the two oval shapes in it. It does have the sand rim, it does have the bay trees. I guess they're always going to debate it. The latest theory on how it was formed is that when this area was covered with the oceans, that there was wind and wave action that kind of carved it out. And then when the oceans receded, we had a lake because everything drains away from Lake Phelps. Nothing drains into it.
Having heard lake formation theories from Chris Helms and Sid Sharon, I decided to go to the guru of North Carolina coastal geology, Dr. Stanley Riggs. I asked Stan about the formation of Carolina bays and these two great lakes, Waccamaw and Phelps.
I like to call these Pocosin lakes, not Carolina Bay lakes. Carolina bays are very different features than Lake Waccamaw and Phelps Lake. Lake Waccamaw and Phelps Lake formed as erosional features associated with a block drainage that took place during the glacial maximum period of time when we had semi-arid to arid environmental conditions and extreme storm events. And these extreme storm events would block the drainages with debris and back up water and produce an ephemeral body of water. And during that portion of the Pleistocene, when we were in these ice ages, we had extreme storms, extreme winds, and the winds would physically erode these lakes, and they're deep erosional features that are cut into the surrounding rock. And these things weren't permanent lakes when they started. They started as ephemeral lakes, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger because they kept blocking, this drainage kept repeatedly being blocked during these storm events.
I still wanted to hear from Stan how the elliptical Carolina bays were formed.
This is in contrast to the Carolina bays, which are these little elliptical impressions. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger and deeper than other times, but they're not erosional features. They're depositional features that form in these shallow playas and mud flats associated with the falling sea level. And where we hold the water back here, we have almost an intertidal flat that produces these things.
What a sight Jones and Bladen County must have been at the peak of these ancient depositional lakes. Even today, they must still be considered one of the major natural wonders of North Carolina. I still had questions for Sid Sharon about the natural wonders of Pettigrew State Park, which is surrounded by Pocosins.
The south side of Lake Phelps is an area that's known for being a deep Pocosin. A Pocosin is a area where organic matter has built up over the years. It gets to be kind of a mound and it stays wet, and it's really what the Indians called a swamp on a hill. It's characterized by a lot of different vegetation of things called the bay trees, and it just covers the areas, and there's about 4 or 5 different species for bay trees.
Here there is enough bay leaf to season all the world's shrimp. But there is a major difference between Lake Waccamaw and Lake Phelps.
Lake Phelps does not have any natural creeks or canals or anything feeding it. It gets most, if not all, its water from rainfall, which means there's no agricultural runoff or there's no cities of any type that's draining in the lake, making it one of North Carolina's cleaner lakes. It is clear lake. It should be coffee colored or tea colored like so many other bay lakes of this region. It is very acid water, but yet largemouth bass, which can't reproduce in acid water, they do real well here. We probably have the best, argumentatively the best largemouth bass fishing in North Carolina, and also we have the best pumpkin seed fishing in North Carolina.
Unlike Lake Waccamaw, there is no limestone to buffer or neutralize the acidic water conditions found in Phelps and most other Pocosin lakes.
The pH of Lake Phelps normally ranges between 4.3 and I've seen it about 5.5, which is acidic. This probably explains why we can't find any shellfish in Lake Phelps.
The acid has been a tremendous benefit for archaeologists because in this water, 30 Indian-made cypress canoes have been found preserved. The oldest are over 6,000 years old.
On the northern shore of Lake Phelps, Pettigrew owns one of eastern North Carolina's last virgin forests. Trees get up to 10 feet in diameter on the park. That would be your ball cypress, but we have other large species such as your tulip poplars. We have the sycamore. Matter of fact, one sycamore we have on the park, I have gotten an entire kindergarten class inside it. Not just, even the understory trees we have large for their kind. The state record persimmon is here. The bay trees, the loblolly bay, sweet bay, and red bay state champions are located here, and the red bay is actually a national champion. This area just grows trees real fast. We have an extremely high water table, a relatively long growing season, and very rich soil.
This unique plant habitat is also one of the richest wildlife habitats on the East Coast.
This is North Carolina's least populated area, and really one of the last truly rural areas in North Carolina, which means it also has more wildlife than anywhere else in North Carolina. When we have bird counts in the winter, most places have thousands of birds. We have hundreds of thousands of birds. When we have the butterfly count, the areas in North Carolina have hundreds of butterflies. We have thousands of butterflies.
Phelps, Waccamaw, and the other large lakes of the coastal plain are shallow and natural. There are numerous man-made ponds, however, one of the most famous of which is Merchant's Millpond in Gates County. Enchanted is the only word that does it justice. No one knows its history and secrets better than Floyd Williams of Merchant's Millpond State Park.
All right, this Merchant's Millpond, the actual mill pond was formed back in the early 1800s. 1811 was when the mill dam was started, and apparently by sometime in 1812 they had the mill up and operating, and they used the water for their water power source. That was the only large source of power that they had during the day. The mill was a very important mill in this area because it was large. It was the largest mill pond in this area, and because of the amount of water that they had backed up here during times of drought, when other mill ponds would be have a shortage of water and wouldn't have enough to actually get into the mill house to turn the wheels, this mill pond generally did. So that made it important. It was a dependable place for people to come and get their grain ground. Most people that come here expect to see this swamp, and it's this low-lying area, and that's all they think. They think that there's really not any solid ground here. But if you go around the mill pond and you actually hike on some of our trails, you'd be surprised how much topography that we have. The mill pond's only 6.5 feet above sea level, but within say 100 feet from the mill pond, you can be up nearly 40 feet elevation.
The geology is diverse, but the natural diversity here is simply astounding.
This area, because of a lot of factors, is really has a tremendous amount of diversity in plant and animal life. The area before the mill pond was built was mostly just a bottomland hardwood area with the swamp areas around in the lower areas, and that was a fairly diverse area. There's lots and lots of life in these areas. But when the mill pond was built, it changed the factors quite a bit. Even though the mill pond is a human formed body of water, it allowed an ecosystem very similar to what you would have if there was a huge beaver dam complex in the area. It allowed permanent water to stand where in the past there would have just been temporary water, and different species were able to take advantage of that, just like in a beaver dam complex.
For many people, this man-made beaver pond offers one of the most exciting canoeing opportunities in North Carolina.
We always encourage people to get in one of the canoes and head out on the Millpond. And when they come back, it's amazing the looks on faces when they come back, because they're just astounded. One of the areas in the lower end of Laster Swamp above the Millpond is called the Enchanted Forest. That's something that I've heard since I've been here. And it's one of those places that if someone is able to go up into and see, it almost looks like there should be little gnomes and creatures jumping out of trees. The tupelo trees that are growing here in the Millpond get some bizarre shapes in them because of mistletoe.
In winter and summer, gray Spanish moss at the extreme northern end of its range makes cypress and tupelo look even more ancient.
All the parks have their list of species that have been identified in those parks. At this point in time, Merchants Millpond has the most identified species, everything from insects all the way up to large mammals.
Among the reptiles are 11 species of turtles. A lovely mixture of snakes. And some of the northernmost alligators in North America. Over 200 species of birds have been observed here. And 34 species of fish live in the park's waters. There are 70 species of butterflies,